The NFL owners meetings was this week, and there were a lot of NFL rules changes that could impact the Miami Dolphins. We'll go through some of the big-time rules changes, how it affects Miami, what this means for the Dolphins, and everything in between. But make sure you are subscribed and make sure you have your notifications turned on. Only 14.3% of you do. That's 9.7 total. We put out daily content, sometimes 2 videos a day. We go live as well for the big events and on Tuesdays. So if you want to stay up to date on everything Miami Dolphins, be subscribed and make sure you have notifications turned on. All right, the first change that was made during at the owners' meeting was the kickoff rules. And we saw the kickoff rules change last year, and the NFL liked what they saw, so they are going to keep those rules, but actually make a subtle change to that as well. Now, there was 2 things being discussed to the kickoff rules. Because remember, they had that rugby-style kickoff rule, and then they had the onside kickoff rule. But with the vote happening this week, one passed, one didn't pass. The one that did pass, the kickoff, if it was a touchback, could go to a 30-yard line last season. Now it is going to be the 35-yard line. And then there is no vote at this time on the onside kick modification. That could happen back in the May meeting. But this is fascinating for the Dolphins because teams will not want to do touchbacks. Why? Because they don't want to give teams the 35-yard line. That's basically midfield already. With how talented these offenses are, no team is going to sign up for that. So you're going to see a lot more kicks inside that landing zone, right? And last year, the NFL has seen an increase in return rate, 33% of a jump and they're expecting a higher jump for 2025 in terms of the 35-yard line starting spot if it is a touchback. Now, when it comes to the other tweaks, Albert Breer had a little bit note here that says the NFL owners approved tweaks to the new kickoff, allowing for the 6-3-2 formation for return teams and changing the touchback line to 35 in order to try to create more returns. Goodell was a big advocate in moving the touchback. But the reason why I wanted to talk about this rule change first for the Miami Dolphins is because I actually think this helps Miami in a big way. As I've consistently mentioned early here, there's going to be more kicks landing in that landing zone in terms of making teams return rather than just kicking it through the back of the end zone, which is good because obviously Braxton Berrios was that return man. He is no longer on the team. And you saw Malik Washington, the 6th-round pick out of Virginia, fill that role last season. I thought he was very good in that role, and I expect him to continue to get better and be a major force for the Dolphins this season. When you look back at his rookie year, he had a total of 32 returns in both kick return and punt returns. He was graded out very high in terms of his kick return from Pro Football Focus with a grade of 79.4. He had 14 overall returns for 430 yards, which averaged 30.7 yards per attempt. That ranked out of players that returned at least 14 times, 11 out of 45. So he was a top 15 kick returner last season. Wasn't as strong in the punt return game, but remember, we're not talking about punt returns. We're talking about how effective he will be in the kick return game with the new rules. So let me ask you this. Do you think this new rule with the kickoff return ultimately helps the Miami Dolphins? If you do, type Y for yes. If you don't, type N for no. I think Malik Washington is going to have an even bigger role on this Dolphins football team, not only in the special teams game, but also on the offense. I think it does help Miami. All right, let's move over to another rule update and change, which is the new video assist review rules. You saw this a little bit last year where the NFL could come down and just quickly talk about and change a out-of-bounds call or something like that. But now there is a new one when it comes to penalties. Now, these are the 5 that this new video assist rules ultimately impacts. It impacts face masks, defenseless players, horse collar tackles, tripping, and roughing the kicker. But I do want this to be abundantly clear. That rule of being able to look at that quickly and deem it, if it is a flag or not a flag, only applies if the flag is thrown. It's very similar to college basketball if you watch it in terms of goaltending, where they can review goaltending if they call it that. But if they don't call goaltending, it can't be reviewed. So what you see happen in college basketball down the stretch is that if it's close at any stretch, the officials will automatically call a goaltending, take a look at the monitor, and quickly review it. I think that's going to be the case here in this season, the NFL, with the new rule. I think flags are going to be thrown if they think anything could have happened with regarding these 5 rules. And then they'll be able to quickly just look at it and then change it, because if they don't throw the flag, they won't be able to look at that. But my question is this. When you look at the 5 rules that now can be, and the flags I should say, that can be reviewed, my one question is, why is roughing the passer not on the list? Is there a flag and penalty that is thrown that is the most subjective, that ultimately causes the most stirring amongst NFL fans on social media than roughing the passer? I don't think there is. You take a look at flags to Tom Brady back in the day, Patrick Mahomes now. Like, their constant concept and conversation about the roughing the passer calls is, like, to me, the most compelling. So why is that not included on the list? I don't know, but it doesn't make any sense to me. All right, a couple new rules that we'll talk about here in just a second as well, but make sure you do get your Miami Dolphins draft hats on sale right now, whether it's the black, the cream one, flat brim, curved brim, one with the icon. Either way, whoever the Miami Dolphins draft at the end of this month will be wearing this hat when they walk across the stage, so get yours in support. Chatsports.com/Dolphins draft hats. That link is in the description and comments of today's video. All right, a new rule regarding NFL free agency, which I found very fascinating. This one was by the Pittsburgh Steelers. For 1 year only, it permits clubs to have one video or phone call with no more than 5 prospective unrestricted free agents during the 2-day negotiation period. Permits clubs to make travel arrangements with such players upon agreeing on terms. And I think this could be big for Miami for a lot of different reasons. One, it will tell a lot of people who the Dolphins are interested in. And I do want it clear that it obviously will be something that won't stall free agency, because on the first day of free agency in that negotiating period, teams start to agree quickly. It's more or less for those free agents that want to take visits, want to get to know organizations. It might happen and come to fruition quicker with this new rule. But why this impacts Miami specifically? Well, Mike McDaniel, for what we think for him and think about him, he is someone that players consistently like. I have not met a player that does not like McDaniel. He is a player's coach. It also is basically a recruiting trip, because if players are not sold on the Dolphins, you could have them come into your building, and who wouldn't want to visit Miami, right? You could set up that meeting. You can talk with them over the phone. And my guy Mitchell Renz made this point. It's kind of like a top 30 visit with the NFL draft. And when you have the free agency period open and you hear the reports that this player had a phone call or a video call with one of these teams and he's going to visit, like, you will know who the Miami Dolphins are at least interested in or targeting. Now, on the flip side of this rule, in terms of the idea that this will help Miami because Mike McDaniel is a player's coach and people gravitate towards him, there is no guarantee that Mike McDaniel will be your head coach this upcoming offseason for the 1 year that this rule is being tested on. If Mike McDaniel does not take the Miami Dolphins to the postseason, has an under 500 record once again, and they falter down the stretch in November and December and don't win in January, well, he's probably on the outs this time next year. So there is a 50-50 side to this, to where it could help Miami if the Dolphins keep McDaniel and play well this season. But if he's not there, well, who knows who that coach could ultimately be. All right, we have one more NFL rule change to get to, but I want to know which one is your favorite. Is it the kickoff? Is it the penalty review assist? Is it the one that we just talked about there? Let me know your favorite NFL rule change down in the comment section. All right, last one comes in by Washington, and this revolves around the postseason. It permits clubs that qualify for the postseason to obtain scouting credentials for 2 consecutive games, weeks 17 and 18, played by a potential postseason opponent. Also requires clubs hosting wildcard games to provide scouting credentials to all teams within the same conference who are participating in the postseason. So this is interesting, and I'll provide some examples. So if you are in the mix for the playoffs, you can send scouts to opponents you might play games in the final 2 weeks. So say, let's by example here. The Miami Dolphins have an unbelievable season. They win the division. They're going to be one of the 3 or 4 seeds. And the Week 17, Week 18 schedules comes around, and the Buffalo Bills, the Cincinnati Bengals, the Los Angeles Chargers have pretty much kind of locked up the 3 wildcard spots. The Dolphins can send scouts to go watch their games in Week 17, Week 18, and be able to provide themselves with more intel for that potential wildcard game. I find that very fascinating. Example number 2. The wild card home teams have to allow scouts from the other teams in the same conference to watch the wild card game. So to me, this is interesting because the Dolphins, if they are in a postseason spot, will have more intel on their opponent, but their opponent will also have more intel on them. I'll be fascinated to see how this ultimately plays out in the first season that it is around after it was passed at the NFL owners' meetings. Now, with that being said, I'm very hopeful that Miami can ultimately use that rule because after missing the postseason last year, there's still being so many skeptical points on this Dolphins roster at safety, cornerback, offensive line, defensive line. There is no guarantee Miami will bounce back from their 8-9 2024 record and make the postseason in 2025. We can only hope that is the case, but there is no guarantee. So let's hope they do make the playoffs and the Dolphins can benefit and use that rule and hopefully get a playoff win. All right, that will do it for this episode of Dolphins Today. Make sure you are subscribed, and this is why you subscribe, because we talk about the latest rumors on this Dolphins team, whether it's in free agency, the draft. We talk about the news that impacts Miami around the NFL as well, and Dolphins news. So join the channel today.